Welcome everyone to the Galien Week webinar dedicated to digital health. Certainly a hot topic. I'm Bernard Pousseau, Chair of the Prix Galien USA Digital Health Committee. This year is the first time the Galien Foundation is granting an award in the digital health category. And as you might expect, we received excellent and often captivating submissions. And therefore, we thought important to shed some light on those companies that submitted their projects, and particularly the 2020 nominees. So we are here today with 7 Digital Health Awards candidates devoted to advance innovation health using digital technologies. And we want to hear from them about views on healthcare and the needed changes in healthcare, the excitement and hurdles to develop digital solutions, dealing with people's medical data, and so many other challenges. So looking forward to their input and their discussion. And along this line, it is now my distinct honor to introduce Gil Bash, Managing Director of the Health Practice at Fin Partners, who will be moderating today's session. I think Gil and I go back 25 years, and it's a real pleasure to do this together.
Bernard, thank you very much for those welcoming comments. And I want to acknowledge you. This is the first time that Galien has really featured digital health. There's no doubt that digital health is going to transform the whole gamut of the life science sector. And to have you chair this committee is very appropriate. In your years as heads of pharmaceutical companies, you're guiding major pharmaceutical companies like Roche as a board director, and certainly your involvement with the Galien Foundation. It's very appreciated. I also want to acknowledge our 7 panelists today. They really represent the best of the best. We received many, many submissions, but to actually have 7 honorees with us, they represent sort of the 1% of digital health innovation that really can potentially change the human condition. I also want to thank the Galien Foundation and Business France for co-hosting this panel. It's a pleasure to see them collaborate on this level. This Galien Foundation submission is truly global. I want to acknowledge our Secretary General of the Galien Foundation, Bruno Cohen, and the leader from Business France, Elsa Riva. So with us are 7 outstanding companies. I'm going to introduce these leaders in just a moment. And these people span every aspect of medical and mental health. They span how information is going to be used. They look at how we as individuals can engage the digital infrastructure, and in fact, by doing so, democratize health itself. In the next 50 minutes, we're going to explore not just what these great companies are doing, but actually some of the challenges that they're facing. And those challenges are important because if you're from the digital health community listening in today, be assured, listening to how these companies are defining and confronting challenge will be key to your success. But before I begin, I want to ask everybody who's listening in on this panel today, there's about 500 of you. I'd like you to take a poll, actually a survey, a brief survey right now. And at the end of the panel, we're going to show you the results. So what you see is the survey in front of you. Please choose one of the survey points. And then at the end of the program, we're going to share with you what the results of the survey are, but only before we ask actually our panelists what they chose. So they're looking as well. Now, with that in mind, I want to introduce our panelists. Obviously, this is a state-of-the-art Zoom presentation. And so I'm not going to go left to right or right to left because on everybody's screens, we're all in different places, and we know that. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our 7 panelists who have been chosen really from great companies. So first, from ADOC, we have Ariel Sham. ADOC is an amazing company. Hey there, Ariel. Is an amazing company dealing with diagnostic assessment. We have next Biomedics, Ziad Rohag, who's calling. Ziad, I think you're calling in from France today, is that correct?
No, I'm actually in San Francisco today.
Aha, you're in San Francisco. You truly are global now. We have Dia Biloop. It's a diabetes interoperability company. Mark Julian is here with us. He is the Chief Executive Officer. Mark, are you with us? I hope so. He's waving.
Yes, indeed, I am.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have from Headspace, Dr. Megan Jones-Bell, who's the Chief Science and Strategy Officer. Headspace is a very innovative digital health product dealing with mindfulness and mental health. And often we think of health, we think of physical health. Obviously, it includes mental health. We have Oken Artificial Intelligence, and we have Michaela Garfuo, and I apologize for the pronunciation of your name. If you just repeat that, please. Is he with us? All right, we'll press on for a moment. From Pear Therapeutics, a behavioral therapy prescription digital therapeutics company, we have Uri Merisovic. Uri, thank you for joining us. And thank you. And from Unify, a company that's really combining artificial intelligence and fertility assessment, we have Milin Yao. Thank you very much for joining us. So what we're going to do is actually be in conversation today. These are companies that are dealing with some of the great challenges of health. And I have a startup question for actually Mark. And then Michaela, I'd like you to be really thinking of this question, because I think it's one of the pressing questions we're dealing with from a societal basis. In the United States, we spend about $3 trillion on health. It's an incredibly fragmented system. Pieces don't speak to each other. Payers don't speak to providers. Patient groups don't speak to policymakers. We're struggling to bring this together. We don't even have electronic medical records that connect one person with another or a patient with the system necessarily. So we're struggling with what's called interoperability. And I wanted to get a little more granular. I wanted to ask Mark, what does this mean when we're looking at information and sharing of information? Mark, what does this mean when we're struggling with chronic conditions like diabetes, where a patient who is type 1 diabetic may have one device for insulin delivery and another device for measuring their blood glucose, and perhaps neither device speaks to one another? What's the impact?
Well, I mean, thank you very much, Jill, because this issue is at the heart of what we do at Jabeloop. We want to make things interoperable, meaning that we want to have devices to interact between each other and talk to each other. And with that, then we can actually improve significantly the way patients are treated and the way that patient and the caregivers can help the patient get a better treatment. And really, interoperability helps to do 3 C's, and I call them the 3 C's of interoperability. The first one is choice for patients, for doctors, and for payers. Choice of device, choice of how they want to use the data. The second one is cost reduction, is really by sharing the data, making sure that everybody has access to the data, or people having the choice of picking which device they want. They can reduce the cost of actually treating the patient in the short term and in the long run. And the last one is really about collaborative innovations. That's my third C, is really about making people able to collaborate and making people able to integrate one device with another. So really, those are the key challenges of the interoperability, that we are facing today.
This is one of the basic challenges I think we're facing right now that you're mapping out, which is sort of collaboration between systems. I really would love to find out if your counterpart from Oken is with us still, and to provide a little bit of insight on that. Michaela, are you there?
Yeah, so thank you, Joe, and thank you, Mark. Indeed, the issue that a company like Oken is trying to waive with regards to the lack of interoperability of systems and any type of device that is able to collect data is, especially with regards to chronic diseases, the lack of longitudinal data and the lack of having all the data in one place for one patient. Because the most information you can collect on one patient, the better you're going to understand the disease, understand potential biomarkers and how some treatment may react and others, especially with diabetes, for example, where, such as other diseases, the sequence of treatment and the exposure to treatment is impacting what happens next with the next sequence of treatment, different treatments. So it's very crucial for a company like ours that are indeed able to get the most of the data, to have the best data possible on diseases, and the longer the disease lasts, the better we can be finding new biological pathways, identifying new biomarkers, and identifying high value subgroups where some treatments may work better than others, or some sequence may be more relevant and more efficient than others. So that would be fantastic to have this long-term follow-up of data in one place, which is not yet the case. So you're talking about the US system. I'm sitting here in Europe, where it's even more fragmented and even more difficult to access data in general, especially public data and reimbursement claims data. And this is also why Oaken has developed this approach that we call federated learning, that is artificially somehow gathering data in one virtual place without moving the data from where they are, to have a chance to compute and send our algorithm to work on larger and more qualitative and quantitative type of data to overcome this lack of interoperability between systems.
You're raising important points here. Now, I want to take what you just said, because the concept of data or utilization of data is not just so critical, as you mentioned, for drug discovery or insights about a patient's treatment. Sometimes it has some very practical, immediate use. And I wanted to ask your colleague, Mylène, her thoughts about this, because you're also dealing with data and trying to deal with it on a very personal care level. Maybe you could sort of expand on what we've heard so far.
Right. Yeah. So there are so many aspects of how we use data. At Unify, we're focusing to apply AI and machine learning to help more women and couples to be able to access treatment. And so one practical way that is already being done today is that we develop IVF success prediction models for each IVF center. And that way, when the doctor is counseling the patient or the couple, he or she can really give accurate, personalized probabilities of treatment success for IVF and other options, so that the patients can really make better decisions. And beyond that, what's really important also is, how is the treatment going to be paid for? And as some of you know, IVF is not covered by insurance plans for a lot of patients, and they have to pay out of pocket. So using AI, we're able to support true value-based IVF care, so that it's not just fee-for-service, but we're looking at what is the course of treatment that will enable a patient to maximize her chance of having a baby. And there's some very objective endpoints, which is having a baby. And these are very practical things.
Yeah, you're touching on such a critical point. So far, the group that has spoken, you've talked about changing practice behavior, integrating information or interoperability, and you've talked about cost. And I wanted to ask Ziad for a moment a question about this, because the whole concept of readying physicians to deal with procedures, and getting them to change sort of like preparation behavior. In looking at what you're doing and you're achieving at BioMedX, could you talk a little bit about not just what you're doing, but the challenge that you have on a granular level of getting physicians to sort of say, hey, this would be a better way to do it?
Yeah, so actually that's a very good point. And I think raised a very good point. It's all about, delivering a solution to a specific patient. When you're dealing with embryology, I've worked in the field before, it's about a particular patient. There's a whole emotional component associated with it. And at the end of the day, it's about getting couples to become pregnant and have a baby. And the solution is very tailored. And we play in the exact same area. So for us at BioMedX, what we deal with is effectively, we are trying to develop a rehearsal programs for physicians, and for specific patients. So it's the entire anatomy of the patient that's at play, and the physician gets to rehearse cases on the specific anatomy of the patient. So we're talking about effectively what you'd call precision medicine or tailored medicine. And one of the challenges is, we have algorithms that we use based on literature and so on, but a lot of the data that we use is very patient specific. So we use a combination of CTs, ultrasound, dynamic data from the cardiac cycles and so on. And getting access to that data is not always very simple because it is somewhat scattered. And the US system is I think, a little more complicated than the European system in that field. But to really be able to deliver specific solutions to a patient, you really need to have access to a variety of data sets for that specific patient. And the more data you have, the more ability you have to analyze it, the better that outcome in terms of the solution is. So that is our challenge at BioMedX. I think we've done a reasonable job as a first generation being able to do that, but we obviously are working with a lot of hospitals and imaging groups. And at the end of the day, it's all going to come down, in my opinion, at least, to the cloud. Where is all this data going to reside, and where is it going to be stored, and how we're going to be able to extract it? And today, I think we have the ability with cloud technologies to be able to store all that data for patients. Now, the big challenge coming up next is being able to transfer that data and make it available very easily.
I'm taken by how all of you are dealing with such great sort of not just the challenge of technology or the challenge of innovation, but the challenge of society. Now, Uri, I wanted to ask you a question about that. Now, you and Per are really looking at a breakthrough area, which is prescription digital therapeutics. It's an area that you and Per have pioneered. And I would love to get your perspective on the sense of, we often talk about patient adherence, the behavior of the patient as being essential to our helping the patient. My question to you and to actually Megan is, what's the role of essentially behavior and mental health in driving the next wave of therapy? Clearly, inventing molecules isn't enough in order to help people. What do you think about that? What are you doing at PAIR to help us?
Thanks for the question. I think it's a really important one, and for us at PAIR, but I think for this whole sector, it's identifying this huge area of need. And as you said, there's many diseases of the brain, particularly mental health, where we do not have good treatments, right? It's been hard to drug. And so prescription digital therapeutics and digital approaches can bring evidence-based approaches to patients. But from my perspective, it's really all about the outcomes and all about access. How do we meet patients where they're at? How do we integrate these new treatment modalities into standard of care? And how does that help with patient engagement? So it's that combination of outcomes and access that really then helps ultimately scale treatment and produce value for the overall health system.
I'd be just curious. I'm going to come back to you in just a few moments. I want to swing over to Megan for a second, and I just want to say, Megan, that obviously I don't know if this looks familiar to you. You can talk a little bit about it, of course. Megan's company, Headspace, is actually one of the few digital health products that sort of made this stage of nomination that's available to consumers directly. And I'd be interested in your perspective, Megan, about how important is it to get close to the consumer in order to help them with this sense of mindfulness or mental health?
Well, I think being close to the consumer is really everything. And I can share an anecdote from when I was actually practicing as a psychologist at Stanford. I had referrals endlessly from specialties across medicine saying, why isn't my patient getting better? Why won't my patient follow the treatment regimen I've set up for them? If only they would take this pill or, eat a healthy diet, their condition would be under control. And I think in healthcare, we've certainly forgotten the role of the mind. And mindfulness, really gets to the heart of that, because it helps us understand really what patients want. They want to live healthy, happy, meaningful lives. And often, particularly with somebody who has a mental health issue or a chronic physical health condition, what gets in the way of them being able to live that healthy, happy life to their fullest potential is really in the mind. And so I think as a field, we've largely ignored some of the simple table stake things that around helping people manage stress, helping people manage the acceptance of living with a condition. That's often one of the biggest barriers is, I don't want to have this. I just want to conceive the child. I just want to live without diabetes. I don't want this in my life. I think if you really listen to patients, you start to understand that actually helping them with something as what seems as simple as mindfulness of being in the present moment, accepting where you are, it's not antithetical to change, but it really helps prepare people for whatever journey they need to go on to actually live a healthy life.
Yeah, thank you. And Ariella, listening to all this, I think one of the central ties of all of our Prix Galien nominees this year is all of you are game changers. Your success will require the system to kind of like see things differently. And one of the things that I think has been in the forefront is diagnostic assessment, particularly in terms of artificial intelligence. It's been, sometimes with change comes controversy. And of course, I don't want to put you on the spot. Maybe I would, but I won't. But each of the companies, each of your colleagues who are participating in this panel, they're doing something that is changing the field of medicine radically. Diagnostic medicine has been on the forefront of that conversation because of artificial intelligence. And maybe you could define a little bit your perspective with ADOC. You're looking at the field. What's not so much the change, but the enhancement? The doctor is not going away because of digital therapeutics, whether they're consumer accessible or prescription, digital therapeutics. The doctor is here to stay. We all agree with that. Why is it, from your perspective, that when people hear artificial intelligence and diagnostics, there's such debate that goes on? How are you working to resolve that debate?
So you're very right, and thank you for the question. It's exactly that, right? The doctor is here to stay. So why is it that when an artificial intelligence tool is presented, there may be this fear? And when I joined ADOC about 3 years ago, that was the discussion. So when I spoke to residents in particular, there was a discussion about, will AI replace me, right? You're a tool, you're able to triage, to detect an abnormality. What will I be going away? And we spent a lot of time with our users to let them understand that this isn't replacing them, this is augmenting them. So we worked on, it's not a new word, but I think in that context of, you're becoming a superhuman in a way, right? You have a tool that's there to help you, and together you're going to improve patient care. And I think that's the discussion that we found has actually worked. So the more that our physicians used the solution and saw the value that it had to their end users, right, to the patients, I found that that fear sort of subsided, and there was this understanding that this is a tool that works with you to augment you. It's not actually competing with you, because as you said, the doctor is here to stay, specifically with cases that are extremely urgent and life-threatening. There's no way that the doctors are going to be replaced by AI.
Now, I find this so fascinating, because when I travel the world and I meet with digital health colleagues, one of the things I find that's so pressing is the set behavior of our system. And there's a culture, and I think that culture sometimes squashes innovation. It doesn't necessarily embrace innovation. And I'd like to ask you all, and I'll sort of point out and invite you in a few questions about culture, about economics, and about embracing change. And I'd like to ask you, if you would, Mark, I'd like to start with you. what you propose doing, particularly for people with type 1 diabetes who have an insulin pump and are checking their blood glucose, it seems kind of intuitive that you would want the blood glucose meter to calibrate with the insulin pump and actually go back to either the primary care or the endocrinologist to sort of like look and see what's going on here. And yet it seems like the system, whatever the system is, you can define the system is kind of a little resilient or resistant to that sort of change. I'd be curious to get your point of view of that. And Yuri, I'd also be curious to get your point of view on this, because the concept of digital therapeutics and getting the prescription industry or the life science industry to buy into that and realize that's valuable and augmenting prescription products could be a real boon to health. So Mark, let's start with you. What's the challenge here for you? I mean, it seems so like given, let's do that, but yet we don't. And you're
Jill, you're so true. And so much that actually patients are today making that move, not waiting for the system to adapt. And
right.
And we are Jabaloop working with the DIY people that are developing DIY systems so that people can actually get access to technology because the system is not fast enough. And frankly, we need a system. We need a system because it's all about protection of patients and making sure that we develop, all of us, systems that are safe for the patient. And it's good to have regulations. It's good to have a system that ensure that the patient is always safe. Now, the big challenge is that system was set when devices or when technology was sort of frozen in time or frozen at some point and were not evolutive. The issue and the challenge with the new technology, software, data analysis, or automatic therapeutics, artificial intelligence linked to therapeutics, making decision for the patient itself, is that it evolves very rapidly, and so the system will have to adapt to that very quick evolution and very, very quick improvement of the solutions. And if we want to bring that to the patient, the system will have to find a way to keep the patient safe, but also to allow them to have access to that, technology. And this is what we're working in France and in the US with, regulators and payers to make them understand that we don't want to hurt the patient. We just want, on the contrary, we want to provide them with the newest technology that is going to save lives. And with type 1 diabetes, it's a every moment issue, and that's why we are very eager to help the system evolve.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a challenge. The system, the system is the challenge itself. And Yuri, you're pioneering the whole area of digital therapeutics. What challenges are you facing? I mean, I've watched Pear Therapeutics for the last few years. You've done some dramatic things. You obviously have had to really pioneer collaboration with the Food and Drug Administration in this country. What are some of the challenges you think you're facing that need to really be overcome for digital therapeutics to take hold?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and there are many things whenever you're doing something new, right? But maybe the one to focus on, in a similar vein that I think several have touched on, there was a recent publication in the Journal of Medical Internet Treatments, or JMIR, that found that over 90% of patients stop using health and wellness apps within the first 7 days. And so just while we have this incredible ability to provide access, how do we continue to get that engagement and to drive it? And because our therapeutics treat serious diseases, we need to focus on what is that value to patient? How do we continue to engage the patient? But what is that value to the clinician? And so we really tried to overcome some of those engagement barriers by fitting into standard of care, having a clinician who actually has a conversation with the patient who's in need and treating their digital treatment just like they would any other medication, and having those same repeat discussions and fitting into the workflow of the clinician. And what we find is when you combine that with then meeting the patient where they're at, so they have access to treatment, it's convenient. They don't necessarily have to leave their home, or they can use it after clinic hours. That is a huge step in trying to help overcome some of those engagement treatments by providing that access, but also fitting into aspects of standard and routine treatment delivery.
That's great. And, you know, I appreciate that so much. And, you know, Megan, I'm just wondering, you know, Yuri's doing this on the prescription side, and, you know, he's working closely with physicians. Headspace went directly out to the consumer. And I don't know if I remember, I'm sporting the Apple Watch Series 6, and I think your app is on my watch also. So, you know, Yuri's going the regulatory route. You obviously have to stay within the confines of, even though it's a consumer access product, I know that you're science driven as well. What's the commonality between what Yuri's doing, his challenges, and your challenges? Because he said something that's so true. Whether it's prescription or consumer accessible, direct to consumer, it sort of like maintaining staying power or connectivity to the digital benefits is a challenge. What are you doing to help us?
To me, that really comes down to a design question around how you are meeting immediate needs of your, you know, whether it's your patients or your, in our case, members. Our members come to us typically because they are stressed, anxious, and not sleeping. We are a health promotion and prevention intervention. We're not treatment, but we really have this dialectic of needing to provide immediate relief for people and also guide them and engage them in intervention content that will actually create meaningful change in their lives. And to me, digital health, this is a classic, you know, this is a core challenge for us because often what it takes, take an anxiety disorder as an example. Treatment for an anxiety disorder is not pleasant. It actually provokes your anxiety as part of the process of treating it. And so, you know, while that's out of the scope of Headspace, I think it's a great example to show sometimes the process of getting better is not something that's inherently enjoyable to engage with. And so that's actually why Headspace has, you know, one, we try to really artfully weave together this experience of give you, you know, the content that will actually be the driver of change, the active ingredient, in our case is meditation, but put that in a consumer-friendly experience that you want to talk about with your friends and family, you want to do together with friends and family. Many of our members actually use the product with other people, even though it's designed, you know, as a individual experience. And so part of our goal really from the beginning 10 years ago was to change culture around how people talk about meditation, as well as how people talk about their mental health. Because when it's in the shadows, we're really not gonna bring it up to our provider in the first place. And so how can you access treatment if you won't even talk about it and ask for help? And so that's part of why, you know, a lot of our work has been, we need to succeed as a consumer brand because mental health has a brand problem. And to really drive change, we have to change that.
I think that you're talking about, you know, the whole concept of stigma. And, you know, I think that whether it's infertility or medication, you know, medication selection or error, you know, there's a stigma that even doctors face. I mean, you're dealing with a very personal stigma that people face that we've got to overcome as a society. So, you know, with this concept of dealing with our sense of self, doctors have a sense of self. The doctors don't like to be wrong. And they don't like necessarily technologies, I think, that may hint that they didn't choose well, either not now, but maybe the last 5 or 6 cases. So I wanna ask some questions of Michelle and Ariella and Milin, really dealing with this. And then I'm going to switch over to Ziad because he's dealing with getting it right in the first place in many cases. So Michelle, the whole concept of medication efficacy, I think that and I could be wrong here, I think that there is something like 200,000 deaths in the United States each year owing to medication error. And obviously, data, artificial intelligence, or looking at what medication is right for what patient at right time is not only critical for their well-being, it's critical for their protection. Do you think that it's possible to use artificial intelligence systems or data to sort of like work with the pharmacist and the physician to get that right faster in the upfront part?
Well, yes, I mean, that's the growl, right? That's where we all want to get to make this precision medicine real and not just a promise or, yeah, just a promise. So in terms of getting down to, as you said, the pharmacist or the physician being in front of one patient and having the faith in the tool built from AI to decide whether he's going to give or not that treatment to a patient. It's really where we want to get. At this point, my company, Oaken, is working on understanding and giving faith in the tools, giving faith in what the AI is indeed finding in the data, such as, digital pathology, radiology, genomics, any type clinical data, of course, any type of data that can be gathered. So the point is, in the first place, to better understand, why we have those different groups and why one patient would respond differently from another one to a certain treatment. And when we hear do not respond, we also need to hear, like you just said, it can be harming. It can be harmful for that patient as well if we don't give it, the right treatment. So beyond, not being enough efficient, it could definitely, be adverse to that patient. So it's crucial to have informed decisions, and to that to get the adherence and to get the buy-in from physicians in AI based tools. We need to understand, we need to get out of this black box image from AI and give the means to be able to interpret, to understand what did the machine see that made it think that this patient would be, having a specific biomarker towards another one. So we are still, quite ahead of the curve from what you say, and it indeed is very different from one therapeutic and one disease to another. Depends on how many data you can access, depends on how advanced we are with understanding the pathways. But really the point here is to, first thing, understand what it is exactly that is happening, and then see whether or not the tools that we are building are going to be the right ones for the right patient at the right time, if I may add that as well. Going back to
we're on that journey, aren't we? We're on that journey.
We are. We are here for that.
It seems so natural, the cost of IVF and the emotional stress. What Megan was talking about, not just the economic burden, but the emotional burden on people who are trying to have families, and the cost involved, the hope involved. It seems so incredible. Wouldn't it be natural or isn't it natural for clinicians to want to deploy insights, technologies such as Unify is offering, to sort of bring that into the fore as quickly as possible? Is that happening? Is there resistance? Are people searching you out? If they're not searching you out, what are the obstacles that you think they have to overcome? Because what we're doing is such an important part of care.
Yeah. So Gilles, it's right. We've actually seen very big changes already happening in the past few years. When we first, launched our program, there was less familiarity with AI and what it could do. in healthcare and also in other applications. But I think now doctors are really familiar with it. They're excited about it. They understand that with AI, better decisions, better insights can be gained. And so they really want to use that as a tool and bring that to their practice. And some of what Michelle said before, we've also experienced. So, you know, even though they are very excited to bring this to their practice, there are still things that I think as a company we can do to make that transition to technology adoption easier. So at Unify, what we kind of focus on is provider empathy. Of course, our product, the actual personalized patient report, is really, you know, we care a lot about patient empathy as well. But in order for the patient to actually receive the report, we want to think about the different concerns that the doctors have. For example, doctors in the past, you know, before AI, they've really been charged with being responsible to know, to understand the rationale behind their actions and recommendations. So how can they now suddenly just say, oh, I default to the Unify AI? They would still feel like I need to understand why this number is the way it is. And I need to feel that this is right, that I'm giving this number. So when we work with doctors, we really collaborate with them. And we, first of all, take a lot of their concerns before we even roll out the service. And we work with them on the report, and we care a lot that this is a counseling tool. So the words in the report must be in the comfort zone of the doctor. And everybody has their own personalized style of how they explain things. So we incorporate a lot of what the doctor's normal practices into the report, so that when they use it, it's not just a generic something that's printed out of the computer, but their own thoughts are in it as well. And they're part of the design. And the other thing is also with technology adoption, you also want to make sure that not just the doctors understand, but the rest of the medical team. Everybody has such an essential role. The medical assistants, the receptionists, the nurses, everybody needs to understand how, you know, this technology helps patients. And I think then, you know, once they get that, they're really all behind it and can have success from it.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's so interesting because the infertility specialist, the OB/GYN infertility specialist, has such a close connection to the family, the couple, or the person who's seeking to have a child. And you know, Ariel, you're working tremendously also in the area of how data can really perfect a physician's decision. And I think that Mylène sort of brought up some key points. You know, doctors, this tension of saying that a machine's going to replace me. No way. But that's not the case, and you know that, and certainly ADOC knows that. But yet your physicians also often are one step removed from the patient. They're looking at data on the behalf of another physician specialist in collaboration. So there's a different sort of dance that goes on with artificial intelligence. Can you talk a little bit about how you're helping the community overcome their concern that machine learning, artificial intelligence, is a replacement tool? As Mylène says, it's augmenting their ability, not removing them from making a decision.
Absolutely, and both Mylène and Michelle, they said a few important words, I believe, about AI. They talked about faith and trust, and developing this relationship with the user. So as you said correctly, on our end, the user is a radiologist, and this is a field that is inundated with data. There are 70% of patients today are being sent to some form of imaging. And so there is just so much data that is, again, there to help patients, but radiologists needs tools to overcome this amount of data to improve the care that they give, again, to the physician that referred to them, and in the end to the end patient. And at least the approach that we took when we started offering our solutions to the market was we looked at the most in-need area within radiology, specifically acute conditions, so intracranial hemorrhages and pulmonary embolisms and C-spine fractures, so conditions that you would encounter in an ED. And we looked at the urgency of trying to treat these patients when there are so many of these coming in at the same time. There's no real way to know who to approach. And so what we found as a an acceptance process with our physicians was, if we are prioritizing this for you, we're not telling you we're better or worse. We're not competing. We're actually showing you that we're a tool. We can tell you, look at this first. And then when you see that, it's your decision. You make the decision. You're still the one who's doing that actual diagnosis in the end. So we're not a diagnosis tool. We're a diagnostic aid to you, the radiologist. And we found that that approach really resonates well, because more and more use cases have come up where it was clear that it is not that they would not have seen this. It's just that there is so much information. There's no real way for them to know how to prioritize who needs urgent care and who doesn't. And there are outpatient facilities that don't look at scans until the following day. And we've encountered conditions where a patient came in for a follow-up scan, an oncology patient, and they happen to have a pulmonary embolism. This is actually not as uncommon as some think. And by flagging this, we were able to help the radiologist bring that patient back and get treated immediately. This wasn't a competition, right? It wasn't even something they would have read until the following day, and here it was. So I feel that there is a way to overcome this if you find the use case, and I think some of my peers just discussed this as well, a use case that is value-based, that the value is clear, where you can help the physician and the inpatient through that.
No, I think, Ariella, what you and Milena have just brought up, and Michelle have just brought up, is the importance of language. There's so many digital health companies. You're all approaching this in so many different ways. I only wish that that the group of you could form a think tank under Bernard Pousseau's leadership and find out what language is most comforting to the health system to get them aligned. Ziad, I want to turn to you with a very pressing question, which is, you are in a way creating medical scenario planning that doctors or health staff can actually engage and sort of like think through and rehearse through the process before it's showtime. Is that correct, first of all? Is that correct?
So that is absolutely correct. So we allow a physician to rehearse their complex procedure before they actually go through the actual procedure. And our model, think of our models as being sort of flight simulators, what we call fully incorporated flight simulators.
Great analogy. I was just thinking of that. So my question, it's so funny because pilots, in order to maintain their license as pilots, have to go and do scenario planning under different weather conditions or engine or equipment conditions, and they look forward to it, as a matter of fact. And even pilots who are retiring look forward to training younger pilots on flight simulators. You're talking about essentially instituting, requiring flight simulators for physicians. Can you talk a little bit about what are the best situations where physicians should be using, in essence, medical flight simulators?
Right. So that's a great point. So, and I think just to refer to a point that Ariella raised earlier, she used the two words, diagnostic aid, and the word aid is really the critical one. So for us, it's about making sure there's value in this technology in helping the physicians prepare for their cases, okay? Without that, we're of no value to these physicians. So what we've done effectively is, in these scenarios, there's a number of very complex procedures out there. So what we looked at, what's a true complex procedures? And we focalize on the ones that have a high risk, like AAA procedure, like neuroaneurysms, like some structural heart procedures, right? So those are critical areas. We have a whole bunch of other plans coming up in the future in other areas, but those are the critical ones. These are complex procedures. The anatomies are very tortuous. The patients have a huge gradient in variability amongst themselves. There's no two patients that are the same in this universe. And I will tell you what's happened in our experience. In fact, we are thinking about doing some work with physicians on the psychological side, because we get tons of feedback saying, look, our fellows are stressed.
Connect with Megan and work that out, please.
Yeah, I will do that, because this is coming from the docs themselves. I mean, the surgeons, the interventionists that are telling us, look, our fellows are really stressed. We're actually now monitoring them in the cath lab and in the OR, taking vital. Exactly, because they're stressed. They're doing this procedure for the first time. We have a massive burnout rate. And this type of technology is amazing. They can go in, do the case the same morning, on the anatomy of the patients with the right biomechanics, figure out what works, what doesn't, sizing, how to access, and so on. And then, drop that level, have a good practice session, and then go in the afternoon the next day and really do the actual case itself. It has a huge psychological impact on these physicians.
And a skill impact, I'm sure, and a skill impact. So in the remaining few moments we have left, thank you for that. In the remaining few moments we have left, first, I just want to say that I think that all of you should get together and stay together and have a Prix Galien digital therapeutics category reunion. The combined insights that you've shared today with some 500 people are illuminating. I want to ask sort of a quick round question of all of you and ask you for 2 words each, 2 words. One is, it can be 3 words, by the way, but the biggest opportunity you think you are facing right now. In other words, whether it's helping patients in a certain way, whether it's changing the system, whether it will improve something, the biggest opportunity, and also in one word, the biggest challenge you face. And if it's the same challenge, that's fine. You don't have to think of another challenge, but I'd like you to think of, again, the biggest opportunity you think you and your enterprise, your company, will bring to society, and the biggest challenge you face in order to do that. And let's start with Mark. Biggest opportunity, biggest challenge, Mark.
Well, for us, it's all about the patient. And so it's not so much an opportunity for us, but more an opportunity for the patients, to really live the life they want and do what they want without we said, the burden of taking care of their disease.
Yep.
Of disease.
And the biggest challenge?
And the biggest challenge is truly regulation and reimbursement.
Regulation and reimbursement. Ziad, biggest opportunity, biggest challenge?
I think the biggest opportunity is customization for the patient. Precision medicine, there's many ways of talking about it. You asked for 1 word, so I said customization.
You got
it. In terms of the difficulty and challenge, it's short-term adoption. Yeah.
Got it. Ariella, biggest opportunity, biggest challenge?
I'm agreeing on the patient care. I think that's the biggest opportunity, expediting, improving. Those are my words for patient care. I also think the challenge is adoption, even though I guess adoption of new technologies, but I think we're beyond the hype. I think Michelle mentioned that. I think we're beyond the hype, and adoption's going to go through that trough of disillusionment and get out enlightened.
Yeah, when this is all over, Bernard's writing all this down. He's going to resolve all these challenges. That's his job. Milin, what do you think are the biggest opportunities, the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I think because we have figured out by using AI a way to better define patient subpopulations, we can really make an impact in accelerating bringing more new therapeutics to market and to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of clinical trials that are looking at IVF-related interventions. And I think the challenges are, the main challenge is that there are many missing pieces in the entire infrastructure of reproductive medicine. Many people work so hard on it, but there has been very little public funding support for many decades. And so, we're really looking at what are the ways to put those missing pieces together collaboratively so that we can move forward and make advances.
Thank you. Megan, what do you think? Biggest opportunity, biggest challenge?
Biggest opportunity is prevention. We already know Headspace has research. We reduce risk factors for a variety of different conditions. And our public discourse around mental health intersecting with an accessible tool really does give us a great opportunity to intervene upstream. The biggest barrier is reimbursement, and specifically reimbursement for those who are not served by an employer-sponsored health plan. Really, reimbursement and distribution through a public health system is, I think, a giant challenge for digital health in general.
Economics. Michelle.
So biggest opportunity is definitely remote data access and also federated learning data access. So that's the biggest opportunity for all the reasons that we've been listing, especially at the beginning of the call. And the biggest challenge is the buy-in and adoption by health authorities of any AI-based tool.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Yuri?
So for the biggest opportunities, I'd say outcomes across the continuum of care. Second is enhancing access. I'd say the biggest challenge is just educating people about a new approach and modality.
Thank you. You know, I would say to our listeners today, to the people who are really at the forefront of life science innovation, Bernard and others, listening to what you feel are the biggest opportunities, it always centers around people, patients. But you've mentioned as the challenges, regulation, reimbursement, and actually I'll call it behavioral change of the system. And I hope that everybody listens to you in their business plans, if those are your colleagues in the industry, and takes that to heart. They've heard from 7 outstanding digital health leaders in the community. I want to thank certainly the Galien Foundation for making this program possible. I want to thank Business France. Before I turn it over to Bernard for our last moments, I know that the poll has closed, and perhaps our Galien staff can pop it up on the screen and all of you can see the results of the poll. There we go. So the number one was investment in population-based primary care prevention and the social determinants of health. I would say as a result of that poll, digital health wins 100%. This was not a fixed poll on the behalf of this category. This is the responses of the hundreds of people who have been listening in. I think that the people who are listening in are saying to the 7 of you, thank you, keep going, we need you. And with that, I turn it back to Bernard Pousseau for closing remarks.
Thank you, Gil. And I think it was a terrific discussion. How about a round of applause to our panelist and great moderator? Very well
I don't know
done.
about the moderator, but the panelists are exceptional. They're worthy of a Prix Galien.
Yeah, you did all very well. And thank you very much. I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed the session as much as I did. You know, I just want, in concluding, I want to share the feeling, which it is so important as a jury member. And when you receive those applications from these many companies, and you know, the point is that you want these projects to happen. You want them to happen fast. And it's probably the biggest compliment I can make to those that have read in depth. So, and you know, it's you've touched on all these reasons, but if I had to summarize them, I'd say, you know, some of you bring increased knowledge. What's wrong with that? I mean, take Diabeloop, a good example. New ways to heal sometimes, like, you know, pair therapeutics. Better informed decision. Who can complain about trying that? Better use of existing data. There is such a waste of data that are not used optimally. So some of your projects are, you know, just collecting those and making sense out of them. Building bridges. I mean, this industry is fragmented. This has been mentioned several times. A lot of data walls, specialty walls, etc. So building bridges, just in the interest of the healthcare professional and the patient, ultimately, again, very obvious. Broader reach to patient, as illustrated by Biomadex or Unify. All of the above converging for better outcomes and more affordable solutions. So, you know, I think rather than seeing, you know, where it might rub, I think we should really pay a lot of attention to showing how healthcare providers and patients will win with the kind of initiatives you're taking. So again, I can't thank you enough, and congratulations on all applicants, by the way, for their hard work and creative approaches. We want you to happen and be in the market. I remind you that for the first time, the Galien Digital Health Award will be granted on Thursday, October 29th at 6:30 p.m. So we're all excited about this and bringing more lights to the project that you're entertaining. It's important because, as we all know, why the Galien Foundation traditionally recognizes the greatest molecules of our times It is also feeling essential today to bring more visibility to the fast-growing digital technologies and their amazing potential in the healthcare field. So progress is in sight through this convergence. And with that, I'll conclude our session. Again, thank you all, and you're most welcome to transition into the Galien MedStartups Award ceremony that will now take place on our site. So thank you again, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Best digital health product.